Zaina moved through the dimly lit apartment with the quiet precision of a predator. She had studied the target for days, and now the time had come to strike. Alex, an earthling who had no idea of the deadly visitor in his home, had been marked for death. As she approached, her heart rate remained steady, her breathing slow and controlled. She had done this 1,000 times. Eliminate, move on. Simple. But then, just as she raised the weapon to end his life, her gaze fell on a photo frame sitting on his desk. In the photo, Alex smiled alongside a woman Zaina recognized instantly. A diplomatic envoy who had mysteriously disappeared during her last mission on Earth. She had been tracking the disappearance of her sibling for years, a trail that had gone cold. Yet there, in the photo, Alex was smiling with the very person she had been searching for. Her mind stopped, and the weapon lowered slightly. Was this a coincidence? Or was there something more to this? Zaina's fingers brushed against the edge of the photo frame, her assassin instincts still present but now clouded by confusion. She studied Alex, who was sitting obliviously on his couch, legs stretched out, focused on his computer screen. The weapon she held felt heavier now, as if the weight of the truth was slowly sinking in. Her heart skipped. 100 scenarios raced through her mind. Could Alex be involved? Had he known about her siblings' work on Earth? Could he be connected to her disappearance? Or was it just another random human coincidence? As the seconds ticked by, her eyes never left the photo, her gaze sharp. She couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that this wasn't just a routine kill. Her mission had shifted in an instant, and with it, the stakes had grown far higher. Zaina's mind was still on high alert, her every move calculated, but there was something about the photograph that held her attention more than any mission briefing ever could. A connection, a thread leading back to a sibling she had thought lost forever. Alex, unaware of the shift in the air, sighed, stretching lazily as he glanced at his phone, texting someone about dinner plans. Zaina took a few steps back, her pulse quickening. The cold exterior of a professional assassin wavered as emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years resurfaced. Her finger hovered near the trigger, but she hesitated. She could kill him now, and it quickly. But something in her gut told her to wait, to think. Without another word, Zaina slipped the weapon into its holster, deciding it was time for questions. She stepped forward, her boots silent on the floor, before speaking. "Alex," she said, her voice cold and calm. "I need you to explain something to me." Alex looked up, startled, his hand freezing mid-text. His confusion mirrored the moment of pause in Zaina's mind. He looked at her, the assassin in front of him, suddenly less menacing and more confused. He adjusted his glasses, his nervousness evident. Who are you?" He chuckled awkwardly, trying to mask the rising unease. "I think you've got the wrong apartment." Zaina's eyes narrowed. "I don't think I have." She crossed the room in 2 strides, standing just inches away from him. She reached forward and took the photo from the desk. "You're familiar with this woman, aren't you?" she asked, her voice soft yet commanding. Alex blinked, leaning forward to examine the picture, recognition flickering across his face as his hand instinctively reached for the frame. "Oh, that's my friend Elise. I mean, we worked together years ago. She went off the grid a while back, disappeared, you know? Some government stuff, I think." Alex scratched the back of his neck, still oblivious to the life-and-death conversation unfolding in front of him. Zaina studied him intently, her eyes hardening as a realization began to settle. "She was more than just a friend, wasn't she? She was involved in something far bigger than you could understand. Something dangerous. Something I've been trying to unravel." Her words hung in the air, thick with tension. Alex swallowed, the weight of the situation beginning to press on him. I don't know what you mean," he stammered. "I just knew her as a colleague. She left Earth a long time ago. Never heard from her again. Look, I'm just a guy who works at a tech company, okay? Don't lie to me," Zaina interrupted, her tone icy. "I saw the photos. You and her had more than a passing acquaintance. Where is she, Alex?" She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. I don't know what you want from me," he replied, his words barely above a whisper. He took a step back, his eyes darting to the window as if considering an escape route. Zaina took a step forward, blocking his path, her eyes unblinking. "I thought I was here to end your life," she muttered, her tone laced with both disbelief and frustration. "But now, I'm beginning to wonder if I'm meant to save it." "Wait, save my life?" Alex repeated, his confusion deepening. I think you have the wrong guy. I don't even know who you are." He was cut off when Zaina raised a hand, silencing him. "Listen carefully," she commanded, her voice low and intense. "I'm not here for your death anymore. I'm here for answers. Answers that you might have, whether you realize it or not." She took another long pause, weighing her next words. "You're going to help me find out what happened to Elise." "I'm not asking, Alex. I'm telling you." Alex opened his mouth to protest, but something about Zaina's presence, her calm authority, the undeniable power she radiated, made him think twice. He closed his mouth, his mind racing. "How do you expect me to help you? I don't know anything about whatever it is you think I'm involved in." Zaina gave him a cold, calculating smile. "You'll help me because you have no choice. I can't let you go. Not until I know what happened to her." Her words were firm, without a trace of doubt. "So, let's unravel this mystery, Earthling, but don't slow me down." Alex hesitated for a moment, then, resigned to the strange and terrifying situation, nodded. "All right. Fine. I'll help. But you need to stop pointing that gun at me." Zaina didn't lower her weapon, but her stance softened ever so slightly. The assassin and the Earthling stood in a standoff, each uncertain of the path ahead, but bound together by the tangled web of mystery that had just begun to unfold. A strange silence filled the room, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. For the first time since Zaina had entered, Alex felt as if the danger wasn't in the air anymore, it was standing right in front of him. He could sense the shift in their dynamic, the change from deadly assassin to reluctant partner. And as uncomfortable as it made him, he couldn't deny the pull of curiosity. The truth, whatever it was, seemed to lie somewhere between the weapon in her hand and the mysterious photo of a woman he thought he'd never see again. Zaina's words hung in the air, and Alex was left scrambling for something to say. "Okay, all right," he muttered, pacing slightly, the confusion still evident on his face. "You want me to help you find someone I haven't seen in years, and you want to do that with me?" He shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around the absurdity of it all. "I mean, you came here to kill me, right?" "I came here to end your life," Zaina replied, her voice sharp, but not without a strange amusement. "Now I'm giving you a chance to live. But if you don't want to help, I can still arrange for that." Her eyes glinted, and for a moment, Alex thought she might just decide to finish what she started. He held up his hands defensively. Okay, I get it. You want to track down Elise. I'll help. But you're really not giving me much choice, are you?" Zaina smirked, a thin line of satisfaction creeping across her face. "No, I'm not. Now sit down. We need to talk strategy." Alex, still unsure of his place in all of this, dropped into a chair across from her. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. This was insane. He had no idea what was going on. An alien assassin, a missing diplomat, and a photo that felt more like a life-or-death bombshell. His thoughts were a blur, and yet something kept nagging at him. He didn't want to be a part of any of this, but the mystery of it all, the sheer madness, was too tempting to pass up. "So, where do we start?" he asked, leaning forward. He could feel the sweat collecting at the back of his neck, but he fought to keep his voice steady. "I'm just a guy who works in tech. I'm not exactly cut out for this kind of thing." Zaina looked at him for a long moment, her eyes calculating, before she responded. "You may not be an assassin, Alex, but you do know people. You know the networks, the systems. You can get access to things I can't." "Great. Alex said with a sarcastic edge. So you're saying I'm your human database? He couldn't keep the dry humor from slipping out. He still had no idea what was going on, but the tension between them was almost too much to ignore. Zaina's presence was powerful, almost suffocating, but there was something oddly intriguing about it. Zaina didn't respond immediately, instead reaching for a small device on her belt. She tapped a few buttons, and the air around them seemed to hum for a moment before a map appeared on the wall. We need to start with the people Elise worked with. She was tied to a high-level diplomatic network before her disappearance. There are certain individuals who know more about her disappearance than they're willing to admit. Alex stared at the map for a moment, his mind working overtime. Wait. You're talking about people with connections. Big connections. Yes, Zaina answered coldly, as if stating the obvious. We start small. We don't go straight for the big players. But we need to figure out who's lying, who's hiding things. You mean we interrogate people? Alex said, trying to keep up. The more she spoke, the more ridiculous this whole situation seemed. He had no experience with interrogations, no clue how to get information from powerful people. Zaina's lips curled into something like a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. You'd be surprised what people will say when they think they're safe. And you'll be the perfect bait. Alex blinked, caught off guard. Bait? He repeated, his voice slightly higher than usual. I'm sorry, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm no one's bait. You're the one who's got all the muscle. Zaina's expression softened, just slightly. You underestimate yourself. You're human. You have ways of getting people to talk that I can't. You'll be invaluable. She paused for a moment, her gaze locking with his. Trust me. Alex was about to argue, but he stopped himself. There was something in the way she said it, so calm, so sure of herself, that made him think for just a moment. Zaina wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. She wasn't human. She wasn't even from his world. And yet, he was beginning to see that he was tangled in something much bigger than his boring office job. With a resigned sigh, Alex slumped back in his chair. All right. What do you need me to do first? Zaina stood up, her movements precise and purposeful. We start with someone who's close to Elisa's last known location. A contact who might be willing to give up a little information if we're persuasive enough. Alex stood as well, shaking his head in disbelief. I'm just a guy, Zaina. I don't have any skills for this kind of stuff. Zaina glanced at him over her shoulder, a small smile playing on her lips. You have one skill, Alex. You're good at making people feel comfortable. That's what I need. If you can get close to the right people, I'll handle the rest. Comfortable? Alex asked, his brow furrowed. I don't know about you, but I'm not exactly the charming type. Zaina turned fully towards him, her expression unreadable. You'd be surprised. Now let's go. We don't have all day. The mission was absurd. It felt ridiculous. But something about Zaina made him think that maybe, just maybe, he could be a part of something bigger than himself. Alex followed her without another word, the tension between them still thick. But now, there was something else, a reluctant understanding. Whether he liked it or not, he was in this now. And maybe, just maybe, there was more at play than a simple missing person. As they walked out of the apartment, Zaina's voice broke the silence. Don't slow me down, Earthling. We don't have time to waste. Alex swallowed. This was real. This was happening. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into, but for the first time, he was actually looking forward to whatever came next. The next few days felt like a blur. Alex wasn't sure whether he was supposed to be terrified or fascinated by the situation he found himself in. 1 minute, he was helping an alien assassin track down a missing diplomat, and the next, he was pretending to be part of a group he had no business being involved in. Zaina's plan was simple: use Alex's human connections to gather information and track down the right leads, all while she remained the cold, calculating force that she was. They spent most of their time in rundown cafes, shadowy alleyways, and seedy clubs, places Alex normally wouldn't dare step foot in. He never imagined his life would end up like this. The truth was, he didn't even know what he was looking for. Zaina had her eyes set on the larger players, the ones who held the real answers. But Alex was still fumbling through his own connections, trying to pull together scraps of information that might mean something. Zaina's approach was simple: get the information, keep it moving. Alex was more or less a distraction, a human face people were less likely to be afraid of. She had no patience for any of the awkward, delicate dance of getting information the right way. And so, he found himself sitting at a grimy bar, nursing a glass of water while she went off to work her magic. It wasn't that Alex wasn't trying, it was just that his skills in this situation were about as effective as a damp napkin. He kept getting the odd feeling that people were watching him, waiting for him to do something. His awkwardness, his lack of experience, it all stood out like a sore thumb. Zaina didn't let him forget it, either. Every time he tried to engage with a contact, she would give him one of those "don't embarrass me" looks. "You're doing it wrong," she'd mutter after an interaction where Alex had tried, admittedly poorly, to ask the right questions. "Right," Alex would respond, trying not to wince. "Next time, I'll be less human and more alien? Less awkward, more confident. Don't overthink it." Zaina didn't sugarcoat things. Ever. But somewhere along the way, Alex had started to pick up on things. He began to recognize the subtleties in how people reacted to him. A small twitch in someone's eye, the way they adjusted their posture. It was all in the details. Zaina's disdain for his approach wasn't misplaced. She had simply underestimated how much he could learn in such a short time. Though, Alex wasn't ready to admit that to her yet. By the time they reached the warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Alex was more aware than ever that this was no longer just about Elise. This was about power, control, and a series of cover-ups that went deeper than he could have ever imagined. Every piece of information they uncovered seemed to lead to a dead end, but something told him the next move would be the one that would break it wide open. He stood next to Zaina, trying to appear calm despite the knots in his stomach. He wasn't an idiot. He could tell that Zaina's irritation had started to grow. The truth was, they were both feeling the pressure. This whole thing wasn't just about finding Elise anymore. It was about survival. And at that moment, survival meant cracking the code before Zaina did something drastic. "Get the info, don't get caught," Zaina had said earlier, but Alex wasn't sure how much of that advice applied anymore. They weren't just hunting down answers. They were playing a game with people who had no problem pulling the rug out from under them, whether they were ready or not. Zaina led the way into the warehouse. Her movements were fluid, the way a predator moves through its environment, silent, efficient, and without hesitation. Alex had never seen anyone quite like her before, and part of him still couldn't figure out if he was more terrified or impressed by her. She moved like she owned the space, her confidence radiating from every step she took. As they approached the target, a series of burly men standing guard outside the building, Alex tried to keep up. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mouth went dry. He wasn't built for this, not like Zaina was. He wasn't trained to blend in with the shadows, to read the room like she could. But she kept pushing him forward. "We don't have all night," she whispered, her breath steady. Alex nodded, feeling every bit like a fish out of water. "Right. I'll go talk to them?" Zaina shot him a look that made him freeze in place. "You're going to stand there and look like you belong. Let me do the talking." "Yeah. Sure," Alex muttered. "I'm great at standing." The guards gave them a cursory glance but didn't move. Zaina stepped forward, her eyes scanning the group with that predatory focus. Alex, meanwhile, was trying to look like he had any clue what was going on. He had no idea what he was supposed to do, except look useful. Or at least, not screw things up too badly. As Zaina spoke with one of the guards, Alex's eyes flitted nervously around the space. He couldn't help but notice the way some of the men stood a little straighter as she approached. He could hear her voice, calm and authoritative, but all Alex could think about was how out of place he felt. Wait, she's really just talking her way in," Alex muttered under his breath. You'll see, Zaina said without turning back. Don't slow me down. Alex nodded, trying to look like he belonged there. But the truth was, he was more of a hindrance than a help. It was clear. Zaina didn't need him to be her muscle. She didn't need him for anything other than what he represented, someone inconspicuous, someone who could slip through unnoticed when the time came. The conversation between Zaina and the guard shifted. There was tension in the air, and Alex could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Zaina's voice dropped lower, and the guard stiffened, his eyes darting to the side. Then it happened. In one fluid motion, Zaina was past the guard, her hand a blur as she disarmed him before the others even realized what was happening. Alex, still in shock, took a step back, almost tripping over his own feet. She didn't miss a beat. Get in. No, Zaina hissed. Alex scrambled to follow, his heart pounding in his ears. He'd never been in this kind of situation before, never been so close to danger, never had the weight of someone else's life in his hands. But as he followed Zaina into the heart of the warehouse, something inside him began to click. This wasn't just about Elise anymore. It was about survival. Zaina moved like a ghost, her instincts razor sharp. Every move was calculated, precise. And for the first time in his life, Alex realized that maybe he could keep up. Maybe he wasn't as useless as he thought. But if he was going to make it through, he'd have to stop second-guessing himself. As they made their way deeper into the building, Alex knew one thing for sure: whatever came next, they had to get out fast. Because Zaina had made it clear, she didn't take kindly to failure. Alex's heart was pounding in his chest as he and Zaina moved deeper into the warehouse. His mind was racing, trying to process the sudden change in pace. Just moments ago, they were still fumbling for clues, trying to piece together a trail that didn't seem to make any sense. But now, they were inside the heart of something far darker, and Alex could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him from every angle. Zaina moved effortlessly through the shadows, her every step precise, her focus unwavering. Alex tried to keep up, his legs slightly out of sync with her perfect stride. She was a machine, cold, calculating, relentless. And Alex? He was just Alex. A guy who got dragged into a deadly mission he didn't understand, with a partner who was leagues ahead of him in every way. Still, he was in it now. There was no turning back. They reached a locked door at the back of the warehouse, and Zaina paused. Alex could hear the faint hum of electronic systems inside, the low buzz of a security network, and the rhythmic pulse of something much larger, something dangerous. She didn't even hesitate. Her fingers moved over the door's control panel with the speed and precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. In seconds, the door clicked open. Inside, the room was dark. There were large metal containers stacked high, along with a series of high-tech machines that hummed with an energy that sent a chill down Alex's spine. He didn't know what they were for, but he knew one thing: they weren't for something good. Zaina stepped forward, pulling Alex along with her. He had no idea what she was looking for, but the look in her eyes told him it was important. She moved from container to container, her gaze scanning each one with an intensity that made Alex nervous. "Do you know what this is?" she asked, her voice low but urgent. Alex shook his head, trying not to look too out of place. "No, not really. But whatever it is, I'm guessing it's bad." Zaina didn't respond immediately. She reached out, tapping a few buttons on the side of one of the machines. A holographic display flickered to life in front of her, showing a list of names and codes, nothing Alex recognized, but everything Zaina clearly did. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Alex thought she might snap. "These are the names of people involved with Elisa's disappearance," she muttered, more to herself than to Alex. "High-ranking officials, dangerous people. They're all connected to the network she was investigating." Alex took a cautious step forward. "So this is about more than just her. This is bigger than you let on." Zaina's gaze flicked to him for a brief second, her expression unreadable. "It always has been. But now it's personal." The air seemed to grow heavier, and Alex could feel the shift in the atmosphere. They weren't just hunting for answers anymore. This was about exposing something much more dangerous, and in that moment, Alex knew there was no going back. Whatever Zaina had dragged him into, it had consequences. Serious ones. "Look, we're here now," Alex said, trying to steady his voice. "We've got the names. But what do we do next?" Zaina didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her attention to a different screen that flickered into life, displaying a series of encrypted files. She punched in a series of commands, and the encryption began to break apart. Alex watched, tension rising in his chest. He had no idea how Zaina was doing it, but there was a quiet elegance in the way she worked, like a predator stalking its prey, just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "You're not going to like this," Zaina said after a few moments, her voice a little more subdued. "But we need to contact someone. Someone who can help us decode the rest of this." Alex frowned. A contact? He couldn't help but feel uneasy. Who would she even trust in a situation like this? She was so self-reliant that the idea of relying on someone else seemed off. Zaina's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something in her expression, something close to vulnerability, but she hid it quickly behind her usual steely exterior. "We need someone with access to the highest levels of the diplomatic network. Someone who has been in the game long enough to know who's really pulling the strings." Alex swallowed hard, feeling his pulse quicken. "And you trust this person?" Zaina paused, her hand hovering over the screen for a moment. Then, with a quiet sigh, she nodded. "I don't have much choice. I trust them more than anyone else I know." Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. For the first time since meeting Zaina, he saw a crack in her armor, a brief hint of uncertainty. It made him realize how much deeper this went than he had initially thought. Zaina wasn't just a cold-blooded assassin, she was also a person with ties to a world that Alex could barely begin to understand. Before he could say anything, Zaina turned to him, her voice sharp. "Stay focused. We don't have time to waste. This will be our last shot." Alex nodded, trying to shake off the weight of the moment. "Right. Let's get this done." They moved quickly, Zaina pulling up a contact's information on the screen. Alex couldn't help but feel a twinge of nervousness as he watched her fingers fly across the console. This wasn't a normal job. This wasn't a normal mission. They weren't hunting down a missing person anymore. They were taking on a force far more powerful, and far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Zaina pressed a final key, and a signal was sent. They stood in silence for a moment, waiting. Alex could feel his stomach churn. Everything had escalated so quickly, and now, they were waiting on someone else to help them take the next step. It felt like a gamble, and Alex hated being out of control. But as he glanced at Zaina, he saw something in her eyes, a fierce determination he hadn't seen before. When the screen lit up with a response, Zaina didn't hesitate. "This is it," she said, her voice low but filled with intent. "We're almost there." The line crackled to life, and a familiar voice echoed through the speakers. "Zaina, I see you've found your way into the lion's den. I assume you need something?" Zaina didn't waste time. "I need access to everything on Elisa's disappearance. Every detail you have. And I need it now." Alex could hear the tension in the voice on the other end. "You know the price, Zaina." "I know," she replied curtly. "This is bigger than you or me. Get me the information." The voice on the other end hesitated for a moment. "Fine. I'll send it through. But you're walking a very thin line. Be careful." The line went dead, and Alex turned to Zaina, his heart still hammering in his chest. "That was intense. Who was that?" Zaina didn't look at him. She just turned away, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the screen. "Someone who knows exactly how far I'm willing to go." For the first time since all of this started, Alex understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a search for answers anymore. This was a game of survival. And the stakes were higher than either of them had anticipated.